Welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded from Sofeast, the podcast where we take you through some of the major topics facing importers and manufacturers in China today. Hi everyone, this is episode 65 of the podcast. It's Adrian back here again with our CEO Renaud. Hi Renaud.
Hey, how you doing? Already 65, huh?
Yeah, I know. 65 episodes. I mean, that's a lot. And if anybody listening hasn't heard them all, there's plenty of links to get back and check some of the older episodes, which you can find in the show notes, and I'll include those. So go take a look. And it's good for me to be back. You've had a number of guests on in the past few episodes. So finally, I'm back with you.
Yes. And so today, what are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about sourcing from China and whether it's something that you can or should do yourself, or whether you should use a sourcing agent, a trading company, or someone else. And I'm hoping that as well as that, you're going to be able to provide some tips for everybody listening that will help them to at least do some of the sourcing themselves if that's what they want to do. So to begin on the topic, I suppose a lot of people's first experience of sourcing from China is going onto the internet and logging on to global sources or Alibaba or your Made in China, and then just starting to look for suppliers for a certain type of product. Is it as simple as that?
That's usually the first step, or maybe the first step is to figure out, what kind of product you want to sell, on what markets, through what distribution channels, what kind of pricing would make sense, and so on. So we're not really covering this in today's podcast.
Right.
But when it comes to really like going after the source of the product, in most cases, it starts like that, especially these days where you can jump on a jet and come to the Canton Fair and the Hong Kong expos and so on. So you, as you say, you go into this website, these directories, you look at what's there, and usually the products that you see are the kind of products that you should not buy because everybody can see it, and there's already plenty of Chinese people selling them in your country probably. But that comes back to your market research and what product you want to buy and so on. So you look for a supplier, and usually by looking at the products that they have made and looking at the other information you can glean about them on those directories, and there starts the whole game of sourcing the right supplier, negotiating the right terms, getting their interest, and all the way through to production and shipment.
Yeah.
So a lot of people go there, and that's fine. The problem is that a lot of people go there without trying to educate themselves about what to do, what not to do. So we just in a recent episode with Rico, we went over some of the most common mistakes that new buyers make, such as give a lot of attention to price and like going for the cheapest supplier. Usually doesn't end up well. Then usually you have products that you get for cheap, but you can't even sell. So actually you lost all your money, things like that. And if people don't educate themselves, then it becomes a very, very risky game. Not that it's not risky if you don't educate yourself, but there are ways to reduce the risks.
And this is really what I'm hoping to get into today. I mean, that risk reduction when we're sourcing, that's really important. And you've already made a great point about the price issue, because I think you've said time and time again on the podcast and written about it. And as you said recently with Rico, talked about pricing, and in a way it makes sense. If you pay peanuts, you're going to get monkeys, right? You're not going to get the highest quality products, and that causes a lot of trouble down the road.
I mean, not only if you pick the lowest price, you might pick someone who has no clue what they're doing, who has
Mm.
never made that product, who's planning to buy it somewhere and just to basically trying to hook you to get your attention. And then later, you know, if they're really good and lucky, they will find it for a price that allows them to make a margin for the price you're paying them. Otherwise, they will find a trick to raise the price when it's too late for the buyer to go back, like maybe after the first payment has been sent.
Mm.
And or they might say, well, they want that, but okay, they only want to pay half the price, you know. And in China, really the way most manufacturers and traders think is if something is supposed to cost $10 and you only want to pay $5, you actually are not expecting the same thing as $10, right?
Mm.
So you kind of you should expect that corners are going to be cut maybe severely here and there, and that's really the whole mentality here. And even if you sue them in China, if you have the right manufacturing contract and so on, um, the judge in China will tend to be very sympathetic to this kind of argument. Yeah, well, you only paid five. The market price is clearly, you know, 8 or 10 or 12.
Mm.
You were not expecting something very good. Sorry,
Yeah.
right? It's the whole idea of what is fair in an sort of unspoken way. You have to look at the context to fully understand what is said. It's not just in China, right? Korea, in Japan, and so on. I mean, in East Asia, that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Not all communication is very, very clear, written, black and white, and so on. And yeah, and they will think, well, no, that you pay for five, you get something roughly worth five. Don't complain, right? And as the buyer, so the problem is that a lot of people come in and then they used to, I don't know, buying on Amazon or something like that. And they say, well, I paid for that. That's the price, and that's what they promised. I'm going to get it. And if I don't get it, I'm going to complain. And then what? You can complain all you want. Nothing's going to happen with the
Mm.
Chinese supplier. So eh, that's the big caveat. If you want to go into the sourcing, first you need to have the time to do it, because you're going to have to identify these potential suppliers. You have to screen them. You have to ask questions. You have to talk to them. But you also need to have some due diligence done on them, and you can do some of that. And you might need to work with some other companies to gather some other information about them. Send an
Mhm.
auditor maybe to the top one or two candidates. Talk with the suppliers about the results and that, and talk about the terms, the more commercial side, and see, maybe you want to develop a new product, what kind of capabilities they have in-house to help you develop it. And then you need to just manage the whole project. And if you don't have 1, 2, 3 hours every day, it's going to be tough, right? But some people do it, and some people do a rather good job at it. So it is possible.
Yeah, okay. That kind of outlines the scope of sourcing. So you made a good comparison there with, shopping from Amazon. You go on Amazon, find something. Oh, that's a good price. You buy it. But we can't compare sourcing from China with that actually, because there's so many risks, as you've said. So if you are planning to find a great supplier in China, get the products that you want that are going to please you and your customers, and you're not necessarily going to do it yourself. So, what are your sourcing options?
Well, as I said, you can try to do it all yourself, and then in that case, obviously, I mean, you cannot do everything yourself. You're not
Right.
gonna, go to China to bring the money to pay. You're gonna use your bank. You're probably not going to give a booking directly to a shipping line or or an airline, you're going to work with a freight forwarder. You're not going to go there to inspect the goods yourself, probably, especially these days. So you're going to have to work with a QA agency. So you still, you have to tap into a network of suppliers like this that you will pay based on the task, and then you do all the rest, right? And as I said, a lot of people do that, sometimes with pretty good result. It's a steep learning curve. Like, now, don't get me wrong. If you can spend some time to educate yourself first, do it by all means. Otherwise, I think the biggest risk actually is that you contact potential suppliers, and then they can feel that you've never done that before, and then you're going to attract the scammers. People are not going to take you seriously. They're going to think, well, this guy, is just, it's his first time here, talking about buying products from China. He doesn't really have a real business importing products. There's a good chance that we get no orders at the end of the day. So we're going to talk to him, we're going to educate him and everything, but it's basically a tire kicker, right? So again, educate yourself, know what to say, what not to say, and we can link to an article I wrote a while ago about the terms you need to discuss with potential suppliers in China. And so you kind of need to have your plan before you talk to the suppliers. You need to know what you're going to tell them, basically. All right. Yep. Otherwise, it's pretty obvious you've never done it.
Okay, so you've outlined a lot of things that you can do yourself, but there's a heck of a lot of stuff there. So what happens if you don't want to tackle all of that yourself?
Well, there's a lot of people who want to help you, right? So historically in China, you have predominantly two types of people who want to help you with that. So you have those that don't really want to take risks, that want to be, just getting the deals to happen, follow along the way, collect their payment, and try to tag along as long as possible, but without taking, financial risks or anything. So these are the agents, and typically they get paid, anywhere between, I don't know, 3 or 4% to 10 or 15% of the order amount, typically the FOB amount. And so they might be paid by the buyer. They might be basically working for free in the buyer's eyes and getting paid by the supplier, by the manufacturer. Okay. In that case, in both cases, you have to understand they want the deal to happen, because that's the way they get paid. So if you start to spend a lot of time working with one supplier, maybe to develop a new product, and then, they keep messing up and keep creating some issues, it might be in your best interest to just stop and go to work with another one, or develop a backup at the same time and everything. Your agent usually will have a different interest. A new supplier will mean more work for them. Maybe, cultivating a backup, doing the development with 2 suppliers at the same time. Damn, that's double the work for the agent, and there's only one deal anyway, and there's going to be only one payment per batch anyway. So they will usually try to get you to stick with the bad supplier. That's the bad side about that. The good side about that, obviously, is that if you see that the supplier is really messing up and you just stop everything, the agent will not get anything, and it doesn't drain your cash flow. They get paid way after they start working. It's actually quite risky still for them. They might do a lot of work for nothing. Right? And in China, there's a little bit of a specialty of, come on, I will help you, that be my friend, and maybe just give me 1%, 2%, or maybe 5% or 10%. And then when they go to the suppliers, they say, hey, I'm the agent for that buyer. And then the suppliers will kind of automatically ask, okay, and then when we give the quotations, what's your percentage? Because we'll just add it to the quote and then give you that percentage. So, they might get paid from both sides. That's the key. Also, if they are paid only from the factory side, so sometimes you go to factories, and it happened a lot during factory audits. You can see it sometimes, and you have the guy, the key contact, and you arrive there and he greets you, and he's sometimes, often, he's the only one who can speak English, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do one order, two orders with them, and then you see that people in the factory speak good English and you can deal directly with them without the agent would be cut out. So they have an interest of working with Chinese factories where nobody's speaking English. And then so he takes you around and everything, and then you kind of feel that actually he's not working here, or
Mm.
yeah, in some cases actually he sits in the factory but doesn't get a salary. He's like an independent guy who says, okay, I will help you with the suppliers, follow up everything, then give me some percentage of the order. And for a factory boss, hey, why not? Because if I hire salespeople anyway, they would want commissions also. So this one would be a little bit higher, but it's only on result. Why not? Let's do it, right? So it's actually
Mm.
quite common. And yeah, and then you say, oh, okay, so where's your seat? Oh yeah, over there, yeah, in the office. Okay, show me. And it's like, it's pretty obvious that he doesn't work here, sometimes. Um, so then you go into, hey, so like, who are you and who's this factory? And yeah, okay, whatever. Okay. It can be a bit funny. So, but some of them you know, are pretty good and are trustworthy and are not playing games. So I'm not saying it's everybody. It's just
Sure.
very widespread, I have to say, that they would get kickbacks, from the factory side without the buyer knowing. And sometimes the more honest and nice and trustworthy they look,
Mm.
the more you have to be careful.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, are they keeping you with the best supplier for you or the best supplier for them?
hmm, yes, so of course their interest is to please, their source of income, and their source of income, yeah, of course. If there's no buyer, there's no income, but they have to keep the factory happy also, because the
Mm.
factory might just kick them out and say, hey, disappear from here. I don't want to see you, and I'm not going to give you a commission because you're just acting in unreasonable ways or something. So they always
Yeah.
need to be reasonable in a Chinese way, with the factory. So never
Yes.
lose that um, from sight. So that can be a good option for starting, but try to have as much transparency as possible into what's going on. It's very
Mm.
difficult, I have to say.
And
And
presumably keep the orders pretty small at the beginning.
yes,
Hmm.
always. In every case, there's always risk anyway, however you got it. So you have to keep your orders low, maybe pay a premium to go with a lower MOQ. Do everything you can to keep your risks limited, basically.
Yeah.
So I said there's historically in China, past 40 years, there's been two kinds of people who want to help you, and then so I covered those that they want to get paid a commission, that they don't mind to work and hope for a good paycheck, once the goods are paid for and shipped out, and try to build a long-term income like that.
Hmm.
Because with every reorder, then they get the money, sometimes without doing very much at all, right? So in the long run, it can become a good business. And then you have those that are more ambitious, that say, no, I'm going to be the supplier myself. I'm going to buy and resell. And so you had a ton of these uh, 15, 20 years ago. And then over time, as the manufacturers simply get better at communicating with export customers, they kind of get squeezed out. But if you start to work in China today with anybody who helps you, there is a chance that they will arrange everything, be your face for everything, and sort of insulate you from what really happens in China and who is going to make the products, and so on. And in the end, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I will arrange everything. Yeah, I'll be your agent. Usually they don't want to say trading company because or middleman or something like that. Usually they say,
Hmm.
yeah, it's fine. I'll be be your agent. I'll arrange everything. You pay this to my company, and don't worry, I'll just arrange everything. And a lot of buyers with no experience just go with that and say, oh, okay, then at least I know you. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, can trust you. Your English is good. We can communicate well. No problem. Let's go ahead. And so again, it can work well if that person actually brings value, right? If they can help during the development, they have some technical knowledge, they basically fill the gaps where just the buyer and the manufacturer together would maybe not do a very good job. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, and then if something, the factory messes up or something, they might catch it, they might push the factory to make it better and so on, or they might conversely really suffer from a lack of control of the manufacturer if they pick the wrong manufacturer and the wrong fit with the buyer. There's also some of that. So that's the trading company. And be very clear, if you don't know who you're going to pay and you work with a so-called agent, well, they might well have a plan that you will pay them. And then who knows if they're making a 5% margin or a 25% margin. And
Mm.
over time, as the price goes up, because they say, oh, labor is getting more expensive, there's more regulation, blah 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 blah. The raw materials are going up and so on. You cannot really double check, who is
Yeah.
really raising the price here. Maybe the factory is raising the price 3%, and but the trading company is raising the price 10% on you,
Mm.
right? I mean that happens. If you're not going to buy very large quantities, in the end, as long as the price works for you, why not? Let's be clear. I'm not saying no to that. Some of them are good, but if they don't say it very clearly from the start, or maybe they might pretend, hey, we're a manufacturer. This is also very, very common. So when
Mm.
when you go at the beginning on globalsources.com, Alibaba.com, and so on, you see a lot of suppliers. Suppliers is very wide. So do they actually, does this company actually manufacture? Do they have the scope of manufacturing the goods? And are they actually manufacturing that kind of goods? Or maybe they have a factory making, I don't know, uh, bikes. Okay, it's a very hot topic these days.
Yes.
And then you go to them and you say, well, I want a electrical skateboard. Hey, it's not really the same product, you know. So they might say, yeah, no problem. Hey, we make bikes, so we know skateboard. Yeah, okay. And if you trust them, you might go along with that. But they probably don't want to have a separate line just to make a few skateboards for you. So they probably go to a skateboard manufacturer and say, oh yeah, we have a customer, they want to buy your kind of product. So what's the price for that? It's very,
Mm.
very common. Things are not very black or white often in China.
Yeah, and that sounds convenient, that they are enterprising enough to go out and find,
Right.
the skateboard manufacturer, and in a way you think, oh well, that's actually pretty good, but there's a lot of risks involved with that because of course you've got no control over the supply chain. You don't know if that
Yeah.
sub manufacturer is making something which is even safe.
Oh, absolutely. You you will probably never see that
Mm.
operation. Even if you come to China, they will say, "Oh yeah, sorry, we're late for that. We haven't started," or you know, and they try to divert you away. Now,
Mm.
of course, if you really want to poke your nose, you might end up seeing that place, and they might say it's their sister factory, or it's owned by their brother, right?
Right.
And that might be true, or that might not be true, and this is going to be very, very difficult to establish.
Right.
Um, but do they really have control over that factory? What if they mess up with quality? Is your supplier going to have the ability actually to pick up on the problems, to detect the quality issues?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Will they say no? And then what? A lot of questions in the air here. So the problem is when you come to China sourcing, a lot of things seem easy, and suppliers are like, yeah, yeah, okay, no problem. And then once you've wired some money and you go into the thick of it, you have all kind of challenges, coming up, and people telling you, oh, there's no way to do that, may banfa.
Mm.
Um, and and then you think, oh, oh, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I'm working with the wrong people. Maybe
Mm.
I skipped some steps here. I went a little bit too fast, right?
Mm.
So anyway, to get back to the topic, yeah, you can work with a trading company. They will make things easier if they are good. They will reduce your risks if they are good. In the long term, this will very probably, not help you with visibility into your supply chain. The control will be in their hands, not your hands. So you really have to extend your trust and sort of delegate your management of your supply chain. If you are planning to make a lot of products, large quantities, this is not really something I suggest. If the
Mm.
quantity is not very high, why not?
Okay, so far you've covered commissioned agents and trading companies, and again you've given basically a similar advice. Small amounts, something which is you're not putting a huge amount of perhaps money into. Maybe it's a good introduction for people who are new to sourcing from China. But if we go on to maybe more serious orders, so we're putting more money on the table, then what's the suggestion?
So yeah, there have been more and more service companies now that there's a bunch of them in China saying, well, you want to buy from China, you need help here on the ground for this, and we're a service provider, and you pay us for this, and we do it, right? And we're basically like a lawyer, an accountant, or something like that. Obviously, with lower fees, and that's what some buyers, especially more experienced buyers, want, because they know they've gone through what I described earlier, or some of that, or maybe all of that, and they want to know about their supply chain. They don't want to have a middleman basically trying to make everything look easy and fix the problems in their own way. They want to know what's going on, and they want to be able to make the important calls.
Hmm.
So in that case, if they own the supply chain and they don't have to, have an agent go along with their own interests and so on. They just pay for service, get the service, boom, done, right? So it's a little bit like having their own team. That's the closest thing to having a buying office on the ground here, um, without the long-term commitment of setting up a company here, going through all the paperwork, having a manager on the ground, um, hiring some staff that if you fire them, for non-performance, you still have to pay them more money, and so on and so forth. It's actually easier to manage contractors, right? So you can just agree on a scope of work, pay them for that, and it might be cheaper actually than having your own staff. Um, and and you fire them if they don't perform. So there's there's a lot of demand for that from certain types
Mm.
of buyers that prefer to pay for service. And there's still a lot of buyers who really don't like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of buyers, especially from, you know, south of Europe, I should say Latin America, a lot of countries where they just don't want to pay for service. They want the work, to be in the price of the products. If you think about it, if they pay some import duties on that price, I mean, it's not very optimal. But anyway, so some people, psychologically do not want to pay for service, and some other people, especially from countries where incomes are not very high, they look at these fees and they're like, whoa, I'm not going to pay
Yeah,
for these fees, right? I mean,
barrier
typically,
to entry.
yeah, people from from India, let's say, and they look at it and say, whoa, yeah, he might be a good engineer, but I'm not paying $40 an hour, so because they think I can pay much lower here. So
Mm.
I can understand that. And so for a certain category of buyers, yes, there's I don't know what to call it. Just let's just call it a service provider, right? Um, and that if you have relatively large orders, it's definitely more interesting than paying either a trading company or a sourcing agent, because both of them get paid as a percentage. So the higher the amount, the higher their fees. However, you might pay the same amount for a lot of these services that I mentioned, um, whether you're buying 5,000 widgets or 50,000 widgets. Actually,
Mm.
it's
Mm.
there's a lot of these fees are kind of fixed fees. Whatever, you want to sign a contract with a supplier. You you do some of the inspection. Maybe you're going to do more inspection, but you're not going to do 10 times more inspections, right? So the proportion of the cost of these fees, is going down in relation to the total order amount as the total order amount gets higher, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And logically, I mean, uh, despite the paying for services issue which you've explained, it kind of makes sense that this is beneficial in many ways to working with the trading company or commissioned agent, merely for the reason that you already mentioned of transparency and control, because once these local experts have been paid, everything is open to you, whereas you don't
Yeah,
know if a trading company or commissioned agent is truly working with your best interests in mind.
right. And especially with trading companies, you don't even know if it's the same factory that's going to make your next order,
Right.
with all the consequences, on the product. So there's a real lack of control here that people resent.
Sure, sure. Okay. So that is sort of sourcing service provider. And there's one more option, right?
Uh, mm, just doing it yourself.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we mentioned earlier. You might hire someone who's done it before, who will do that work in your company. You might, some people look for a consultant just to advise them along the way, or to do some of the work. Or if you're just starting out, keep things simple. Go for a relatively simple product.
Mm.
Um, don't go for very high quantities. And there's a lot of information on the internet about how to start to buy from China, basically, and be aware again of the terms you
Mm.
can negotiate, and be aware of what would impact quality and delivery times and so on. And you know, go at it. Be ready to make some mistakes and to learn. And by the time you're working with your second or third supplier and your fifth or sixth or tenth order, you'll be much more familiar with the process. But at the beginning, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a ride. You need to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned resources on the internet that can educate you when you're starting to source from China. You've actually written an ebook on this, a guide to sourcing from China and developing suppliers, which is over 80 pages. So I'll definitely give the link to that, so everybody listening can grab that ebook. It's free, and have a good read of it.
That would be helpful, yes.
Mm. Okay, and so to round off the episode, then some closing tips from yourself when you're sourcing.
Well, I will simply repeat some of the key things that
Yeah.
we mentioned here. Educate yourself anyway, even, now if you really don't have the time for that and so on, then yeah, look for an agent, maybe a trading company, or maybe the problem is going directly to a manufacturer. If they have good communication skills and you're going to buy one of their standard products with very minimal or no customization needed, that might be okay, but be aware it's going to take you some time. So now, where are you going to find someone to help you along the way, just to sort of manage the project? Right? You need to find a resource. Maybe someone who's already done that in your country that you can find, easily, and you can explain to you along the way, as they are working through your order. Might be a sourcing agent, might be a service provider, right? So it really depends. And then the more you want to go for relatively complex projects, maybe with a customized product that you develop, then you're going to need a lot more resources, and then it's another ball game. If you are just starting to buy from China, it might not be the best idea, to go for that. However, if that's your project, well, you need to really budget for a lot of support along the way. If that's really your project to develop a new product, yeah, don't go directly to a new to a manufacturer. There's a lot of risks with that, including loss of intellectual property, including them going too fast, not having a structured process for introduction of new product, and then getting into all kinds of issues, very, very common. So you need to work with people who are specialized, who've already developed some products in that space, right? And that could be a sourcing agent if it's not very technical, but most sourcing agents are not technical and not really able to help you there, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, you need to go more for a service provider. Yeah.
Okay. And maybe a final point is also talking about the quality management as well. I know you've mentioned that many times, that factory audits and product inspections, they're an absolute must, right?
I would say inspections, yes, of course. Factory audits, well, if your due diligence, let's say your background research on the manufacturer looks very, very promising, very positive, you might not need it. Otherwise, yeah, it's definitely something that will reduce your risks of picking the wrong supplier, basically.
Well, that's a lot to digest about sourcing from China, but a really good introduction and some very, very good advice on, I suppose, the pros and cons of the different options, whether you choose to go with a commissioned agent to help you, a trading company, a service provider, or even do it yourself by going direct. We've mentioned a number of times we actually are a service provider like this. So if you haven't been to sofeast.com just yet, why don't you go check out the website? So thanks very much, Renaud, for filling us all in on that.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to like and share, and you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other places that you get your podcasts from. See you next time.